Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a mom of 3. I'm also a BPS Citywide Parent Council Assistant Co-Chair and SPEDPAC representative for my middle child's elementary school. I'm a leader. You might be wondering what Families First is. To me, Families First is a place where parents get together and support one another. But it's also other things.
Families First is support in the face of all the stress parents are under.
A space to talk freely and share experiences.
A place where parents gather.
Families First is an opportunity for parents to lead.
Families First is a chance to build community.
The fact is, every parent takes away something different from Families First. For me, Families First is a place where I could be honest with myself and identify where I could improve my parenting abilities through the awareness and the information that was provided. It was a space that allowed us as families to learn more from each other. I don't trust easy and often don't get the full benefit of things because my guard is always up, but I didn't feel that during the program. It was a safe space. I'll hold with me forever this knowledge that I was given. I appreciate Families First, the staff, and every family that I met with in the program. I learned something from each and every one of you. It's the realness and rawness that makes us feel connected. At the end of the day, we're all parents and coming together for one another. I took a lot of specific tips from this program. For me, learning about temperament was really impactful because I was able to take that information and move forward in helping my youngest child even more. Parenting is a tough job. It's so many things wrapped into one. Parenting is challenging. It's also truly rewarding. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's been great to have a partnership with Families First and all the other families and caregivers. Thanks, Families First.
All right. That's nice to see that. That actually comes right from our breakfast this fall. And some of the folks who are speaking are present with us today, which is exciting too. Nice to see Walter, who's one of parent ambassadors, who's actually a part of Families First and is here with us today too. So good afternoon and welcome to the Leadership Luncheon. I'm Sue Kovitz, the Executive Director here. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces, but also actually a lot of new folks. So glad we showed the video because I think it is helpful to since our focus today is not so much on what we do, but a special guest speaker who I will introduce in a minute. I think it's nice to see so many of you all joining us for the first time. Want to thank Seth for organizing us, Seth Goldberg, who's the Assistant Director of Individual Giving, and the rest of the Families First team for making the event possible today. For those of you who don't know us, I'll just share a little more. Families First is Boston's leading provider of early childhood parenting education, family engagement, and parent leadership programming. We were founded in 1988 by Boston Children's Museum and the Center for Parenting Studies at Wheelock. For more than 30 years, we have been providing research-based parenting education and support to help parents raise healthy and resilient children. In 2016, we began focusing exclusively on the early childhood years, when parents have the greatest opportunity to help their children build a strong foundation for lifelong learning and well-being. Now turning to today, you can imagine there's a great deal of research that underpins the work we do with families, and there's no doubt that parents play a critical role in the lives of their children, especially during the early years. So our goal today is to share some of that research with you. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Susan Dickstein, who will speak about the importance of early childhood programs. Dr. Dickstein is a founding member of the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Association for Infant Mental Health. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and an associate professor at Brown Medical School, departments of psychiatry and human behavior and pediatrics. She is a consulting psychologist at Bradley Hospital. For 2 decades, Dr. Dickstein was the director of the Bradley Hospital Early Childhood Clinical Research Center. And currently, she is working on a systems change initiative to embed early relational health practices within Rhode Island's safe and secure baby court in partnership with the Rhode Island Child Welfare Department. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping issues. I would just while Susan is talking, if you want to put your questions into the chat, we will keep track of them. Seth, or one of the team members, if Seth's, hopefully Seth's computer is working well enough for this to happen, but someone on our team will keep track of the questions so that at the end we can ask Susan some of those and hopefully get the answers, get in as many answers as we can. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Sue. I am so thrilled and delighted to be here. I really am honored that Judy, Ramondi, and Maureen, and Sue, and Seth asked me to be here and to join you all for lunch, although I don't see anybody with any kind of food in front of them, but okay, this is our new way of being together for lunch. I'm gonna try to share my screen. Let's see. And now I can see some of you. Let's see. Let me do this. Oops. Can you see that? If you can just give me a thumbs up. That's great. As we were preparing, I just want to tell you, thank you for all the thumbs up and the nodding. I can see some of you on the side of my screen. Because I didn't grow up in the age of all of this technology, as I'm talking, I'm actually going to be looking at the people that I see on the side of my screen. So if you're nodding, that really helps me. But also I know that people are really used to putting their questions in chat, which is terrific. I'm going to be focusing on sort of talking. And I'm thrilled that Seth and Maureen and Sue are going to be monitoring that. So if at certain points, feel free to interrupt. Feel free to stop and say, oh, here's a question that's really, relevant. If we don't get to the questions during the time, I'm happy to answer them afterwards, or I'm happy to be available on email if we don't get to some questions, and I'm happy to follow up after. So anyway, I am thrilled to be here. And we, in planning this time together, I thought maybe I would talk a little bit about research, but really in how research is meaningful for us as parents, as providers, as parent leaders. This was the first time I actually saw that beautiful 2-minute video of Families First. And I just wrote down all of this all of these words that you were talking about, the parents speaking as being leaders, as building community, as learning from each other and supporting each other. And I just can't help but say that everything the parents brought up in terms of how they've been supported through Families First is what's good for babies. And my perspective as a clinical psychologist, but really somebody who is an infant mental health specialist, that's what infant mental health is all about. So I'm going to be talking about parenting in times of stress and focusing on the power of positive relationships. Everything that I say really is going to have an empirical or research basis. I'm not going to let you know about the studies, but if anybody's particularly interested in the science, I am happy to talk about that as well. So here we are, and I think I sort of mentioned that we're really going to be focusing on how nurturing relationships are the key for healthy development. And actually, they're also the key for early childhood mental health. So I've been talking for the last 10 months to people in this format through Zoom. And I always start by having us all have a chance to settle in. These are certainly challenging and very uncertain times. Initially, if you can remember back to March, which is, for me, feels like 10 years ago, when we started needing to be inside, we kind of thought as the pandemic hit that we were kind of running a sprint. We were doing what we needed to do. We were figuring things out. There was so much we didn't know. And as we were running as fast as we could, that actually we were running for longer than we expected. this is going, it turns out that we're running a marathon or a ultra or whatever. I'm not a runner, as Judy knows, but I think it's exhausting. And when I talk with people, when I talk with providers in the community and parents, the word that I hear over and over again is we're exhausted. The COVID pandemic has also highlighted, the COVID pandemic has brought us inside, brought us needing to figure out how to be together in a distanced way. What I can tell you is the Zoom technology and being together like this can be very wonderful. And even babies can benefit from seeing people on a screen. There's research now that really shows that, for example, if there are babies in child welfare who are separated from their parents, or if there are grandparents who can't see their own grandchildren, to the extent that babies can, obviously with the help of their parents, engage in relationships through the screen, and as long as they're repeated and regular and nurturing, babies actually can make connections with people through the screen. Anyway, but the pandemic has changed our routines. It has created new worries for employment, for housing, that sort of thing. It has also highlighted longstanding and systemic racial bias, inequity, and violence that has been stressful in our history and is currently stressful now. There have been climate-related tragedies and toxic politics. All of this is how we come together, and it creates a baseline for us as adults of stress. We might find that we're distracted. We might find we're upset. We're not 100, we don't bring our 100% selves, perhaps, to our work, to our children, to our parenting. And what I want to say is, how could we not be upset? How could we bring our 100% selves given this kind of context? So toward the end today, we'll be talking about giving ourselves grace to not be 100%, and to pay attention that our own self-care is important for us, and what is important for us helps our children. So I just wanted to give you a 2 seconds overview of, I am the executive director of the Rhode Island Association for Infant Mental Health. This is part of a national organization called the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health. And our vision is that all infants and young children in Rhode Island, and there are 32 states, including Massachusetts, that has an infant mental health association that believes that young children and babies thrive through their experiences of nurturing and protective relationships with parents and all the providers who care for them. I think I wanted to say this because I think this is fully aligned with the vision, mission, and values of Families First. We collaborate, educate, and advocate for a knowledgeable and well-supported workforce that prioritizes early relationships as the foundation for all health development, mental health, and learning to come. Our guiding principles are that relationships are the foundation for healthy development. We use reflection as a cornerstone of the work. That means whether we're providers or parents, our ability to be self-aware, what's making us stressed, what's making us reactive, is incredibly important, because the more we can understand our own reactions, we can be empathic and compassionate toward others, including our children. We also recognize the specialized skills and supports of the workforce. They are holding a lot of stress, both in their own families and as well as they're supporting families out in the community. And finally, we respect that each baby is born into a unique cultural and family circumstance, and we're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that serve to mitigate bias and disparity in all of the work that we do. So I've used the term infant mental health. I've kind of thrown it out here a couple of times. And I've realized that not everybody kind of understands, and not everybody actually expects the three words infant mental health to actually be joined together. I can tell you a really brief story that 2 summers ago, when I was taking a Zumba class during the summer, which was fantastic. I basically did all of my exercising in the summer, so I didn't have to do it for the rest of the year. So I was going every day and I was meeting people, but I didn't really talk to people too much. And then somebody wanted to introduce themselves to me, and we started to chat. And the woman asked me, "So what do you do?" And I decided to be brave and courageous, and I said, "I'm an infant mental health psychologist." And her mouth dropped open. I will tell you, if you want to make friends, that's not really the line you should be using, that you're an infant mental health psychologist. Anyway, her mouth dropped open and she said, you do realize that babies don't talk, don't you?" And it was at that moment that I realized that when I talk about infant mental health, for many, they think about this cartoon. Immediately what gets conjured up, first of all, is mental illness, that babies have problems or that adults have problems. I think in our society, when we talk about mental health, what I like to say is we all want health and mental health. We also do want to assess and address that there are mental health challenges, but mental health is a good thing. So people immediately think that probably as a mental health specialist, what I'm doing, I guess I'm the man sitting over there taking notes as the psychoanalytic therapist, waiting for the baby to say something. And in fact, this isn't what mental health is about, or the field of infant mental health. What we really do is work to provide the nurturing, supportive relationships and experiences that babies need to grow and thrive. I'm going to show you a 30-second little clip of a baby who's about 9 or 10 months old. And if I could have seen you all, we would have had a discussion, or if we had more time. But look at this video and pay attention to what's going on for you in terms of reactions to seeing the video. And I'm hoping that this is going to work. I'm going to try it this way. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Can you see that? You can't see the baby? Oh. All right, I'm going to try one more time. How about this one?
Chances are, if you just do a new screen share to tell Zoom that you want to show your the internet, and then it'll go show you that window.
Okay, brilliant. Let's see if I can. If I can't get this up, I'll just move on. Oh, here it is. How about that?
There you go.
Oh, yay. Okay. Marissa, you are brilliant.
That's it.
Okay.
Happy to help.
Here we go. Oh, okay. I just want to look at your faces for a moment. Every time I see that, I can't help but smile. That baby is showing us the elements of infant, what it means to be mentally healthy when you're an infant, showing us the elements of infant mental health. Did that baby seem confident Did the baby seem like the whole world was paying attention to her when she was doing this important task? She was full of herself. She was confident. And one of the most important things to show us about infant mental health in that 27-second video was the last second. And in the last second, what she did, if you noticed, was, yes, she looked back for verification. She looked back. So this baby knew, even though she was reciting her book and reading to the world, because she was reading, even though we couldn't understand the words particularly, she was reading to the world. Even though she was reading to the world, she knew that the people, the big people behind her were paying attention, and she just was checking in with them. That ability to know that there is somebody behind you, that there's somebody there to support, to be there for you, is what infant mental health is all about. That's when babies can go out and explore, can go out and take chances, can go out and say, I'm here, I'm confident, and I got this in the world, as long as I know you're back here. So that's that 27-second video actually teaches, I think, infant mental health better than a full course. Okay, let's see if I can do this again. So, are we back to this? Yes. All right. So the definition of infant mental health is the developing capacity of the child to form close and secure relationships, the big people that stand behind, to experience, manage, and express a full range of emotions, and to explore the environment and learn, all in the context of their family, their community, and culture. So we do know the science has been very, very consistent and to tell us that all early experiences matter. The first 1,000 days or the first 3 years or so lay the foundation for all future development. Babies' brains are developing at a more rapid rate at this time than at any other time in life. And babies take in all of their experiences. As Ed Tronick says, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So family stress related to our current family situation, our current historic or systemic challenges impacts the baby's nervous system and stress hormones that can damage the development of brain architecture and lead to problems. We also know that early relationships matter. Like the roots of a tree, early relationships are foundational. The experiences that a young child has with their primary caregivers actually are the mechanisms by which that brain development happens. So all children are wired, meaning when they're born, they are innately wired to form attachment relationships. They can't help it. These are human babies across the globe cannot help it. We're wired to do this. And infants and toddlers depend on supportive and protective relationships with their parents and their primary caregivers for development in all domains, because the relationships that babies have with their primary caregivers are what, as I mentioned, are what help the brain create, it's called creating synapses or creating connections that let the baby know about emotion regulation and how to interpret the world around them. So it is human nature to be exposed to stress. Being exposed to stress is not the problem. How we regulate our exposure to stress is everything. And for infants and toddlers, and really I would argue for our entire lives, for adults as well, it's our relationship connections that help us moderate and understand stress. And what we know in babies is when they do get stressed, because they do, if you imagine a baby, the stress reactions are so critically important. Babies when they get hungry, for example, newborn infants even, when they get hungry or are in pain or are uncomfortable because of a wet diaper, for example, what they do is their hormones react and they get stressed and they cry. That is a universal human response. It's a stress response. If you monitored them, you would see their physiological indicators going off the charts. And through the nurturance and caring of their primary caregivers, to pick them up and rock them, to wonder if they can change a wet diaper, whatever it is, you will see all of the physiology come back to baseline. What that means is through early relationships, right from the beginning, babies get stressed, as they should, because we all get stressed. And through the relationships, we learn to regulate. And it's through that regulation and that repeated feeling, right? We all know that if we ever picked up a crying baby and we got the rocking just right, or we figured out just the right way to talk to that baby and the baby stops crying, the baby settles and so do we. So when we engage with a baby like that in the understanding what that baby might need, so that attunement or that connection to help regulate emotions, it's good for the baby and it's good for us. So just turning a little bit to parenting in times of stress, we know that more than 1 in 4 women experience pregnancy or postpartum mood or anxiety disorders. And on top of that, most do not receive adequate treatment. About half of young mothers report feeling socially isolated or friendless. A quarter of families who live with young children live with significant economic adversity. There are trauma and other stressful life events that affect many parents and young children, and race matters, as we talked about before. For example, even before becoming mothers, Black women can experience weathering, which is a really important concept that talks about the historic and over generations impact of bias, which sets the stage for vulnerability during pregnancy and beyond. So given that stress is part of our lives, and given that we are so important for babies, what does that mean for our parenting? Because we know that children do respond to stress, as I mentioned before, the normative types of stress. In our good protective relationships, we can help babies. Children's responses to other stressful family circumstances are unique and varied. So if families are more stressed, you might see, or if families are going through episodes of more intense stress, you might see that in a baby's reactions and a young child. You might see some children becoming more irritable, clingy, or withdrawn. You might see some babies showing developmental regressions. If they used to sleep in a regular way, maybe their sleep is disturbed. Some may demand extra attention. Some may not want to be with you at all, that sort of thing. Their routines and sleep are disrupted. Again, when adults are responding to stress and when adults are parenting in stressful circumstances, babies, I like to say sometimes babies are like emotional sponges. They do experience that stress. The good news is it's not only the stress that babies experience and soak up from us. When they do, our positive and protective presence for babies actually makes a difference and can mitigate that stress. You may have heard about studies, we talk about ACEs studies, the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies that show that when adults have experienced lots of different adversities in their own early childhood, they end up growing up to be adults who have significantly more health and mental health challenges. Part of the study that we don't talk about that much, but which I think actually from an infant mental health perspective, and I know from a families first perspective, is key. And what I can also tell you is that all of the research that I did for 2 decades at Brown supported this. And that is, despite stressful circumstances and despite stressful experiences, to the extent that we have supportive, nurturing relationships, we can overcome the impact of that stress on our bodies. So the positive childhood experiences, not just the adverse ones, actually predict adult mental health and relational health. So I can just very quickly, in the ACEs study, there were a sample of about 6,000 adults. This is from Kaiser Permanente in California, about 6,000 adults, all of whom had high rates of early adversity early on when they were little. About half of those adults grew up to be adults who had high rates of chronic illness, diabetes, heart disease, and mental illness. That is related to early adversity early on. But half of those adults with the same early adversity grew up to be adults who didn't, who were thriving, who were not ill. And there was only one factor in this study that separated those adults, all of whom, all 6,000 of whom had high rates of early adversity. There was only one factor that separated those who went on to have health and mental health issues from those who didn't. And that was if they reported that they had a positive, nurturing relationship with their parent as a child, they went, despite the adversity they experienced, they went on to have that stress be mitigated. So that is powerful. And it's as important, if not from my perspective, more important part of the story that we need to know, that despite the stress that's going on around us, to the extent that we can bring positive, protective, and nurturing parenting to our babies, it protects them. So how do we do this when we're stressed as well? This is one of my favorite quotes from Fred Rogers. And what he said was, at many times throughout their lives, children will feel the world has turned topsy-turvy, and certainly this is one of those times. It's not the ever-present smile that will help them feel secure. It's knowing that love can hold many feelings, including sadness, and that they can count on the people they have to be with them until the world turns right side up again. And I think what Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, is talking about is that having children and having adults experience the range of emotions that we're really and authentically feeling. We don't only have to be happy, especially when circumstances are that there are times when we're stressed. We can be stressed, we can be sad, we can be upset, and that's okay. In fact, that teaches our children that there's a range of emotions that they are really feeling, and they can express them to us. We feel them also, and that's a point of connection. What children really need to know is that we're here for them and that we're present despite the stress. One of the ways that we can do that is creating time and having time available to play. Play for children is the #1 way that they learn about their worlds. I have talked to many parents and many providers who say, oh boy, this is the time, like I want my kids to go over there and play. Go, I hope, I want them to go play, that's fine. Do I have to do it with them? Independent play is wonderful, and it's very important for children. Interactive play, particularly interactive play with adults and their parents, is also incredibly important. And so during times of stress, playing with children actually not only helps them, but it also can help us if we can get into it. So in addition to boosting a child's health and development, play helps to build those safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. Even though I might be stressed, here we are, we're going to take this moment and we're going to build a tower together. The mutual joy and one-on-one interaction that happens during play can actually buffer the body's stress, can manage the body's stress response system and buffer against stress that we're experiencing. So play is really critically important. We can talk about that. How do we get ourselves, if we as adults are stressed, and for really good reasons, how do we bring ourselves to a moment where we can really be present with our kids, to play, to be there, to read, to do the kinds of things that show our kids that we're there for them? And that is, we need to pay attention to ourselves. And when I started talking about this with groups of people, what I heard was, people were shaking their head, yep, I believe you, but really secretly feeling like, I'm not going to do that. That feels self-care to me right now at this moment, like I come last. Self-care feels selfish if I take time for myself. And what we can say is that self-care is actually one of the most important things that you can do for your children. To the extent that you can figure out ways to regulate your own emotions, to regulate your own stress, to have moments where you can be paying attention to yourself, so then you can be more present for your children benefit. Kate Rosenblum is a colleague of mine at Michigan at the Zero to Thrive program, and she says practicing the 3 R's helps us refuel. And it's the same advice we offer to kids. That's good for ourselves. Remind us that all of our feelings are okay and understandable. If we are feeling sad or upset about something, it's okay. It makes sense. And we might need to help our kids understand it's not necessarily going to last forever, because we get upset and then we're going to regulate around those things. Our routines are very important. Keeping a daily schedule and with time for the things that you must do, paired with open moments where you can just be, are very important. Also, keeping routines for children during times of stress is critically important. We may be tempted to, forego bedtimes if kids are not needing to get up for school and that sort of thing. The more we can maintain regular schedules for sleeping and eating, exercise, rest, that sort of thing, the better off we are. And then regulating, actively engaging in strategies that help you feel calm. And this is different for everybody. For me, doing yoga would make me very stressed. It is not my thing. Although I know in this pandemic, many people are doing yoga, and that is very much a centering, mindful thing for them. Drawing, reaching out to a friend, taking a walk, deep breathing, anything that sitting and imagining, doing a guided imagery with yourself, sitting and imagining yourself in the most relaxing place you can for a minute. All of those kinds of things, whatever it is for you that helps you regulate your emotions, bring you to the present, will be helpful. And some of these things are things you can do with your kids. The overall message from an infant mental health perspective is how you are is just as important as what you do. And what I can also add is our babies and our young children notice. So I think maybe what I'll do is stop there for a moment. I hope this is good timing. and take questions or wonder with you together what you think about parenting in times of stress.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dickstein. We really appreciate you being here. I do encourage people to either unmute yourselves to ask Dr. Dickstein a question or put it in the chat. I will leave the space for just a second in case people feel bold, or we can start with a question that was asked beforehand. So would anyone like to start?
I have a question, and I came in, I think, just as you were starting your presentation. I apologize that I had to be late, but I'm just curious how, in your presentations, in your work over the years, what do you find most challenging part of the messaging with parents of young children? Because I'm guessing that the positive element, or the element about self-care, might be the most challenging, the one that people feel, oh, I just can't take time for that. So I'm just curious what you find, how easily does the message take hold, and what are the biggest challenges?
That is such a great question. And I think in general, just as a general comment, the messaging around my field in particular, infant mental health, is tricky. But I think the messaging is both how, what's coming to mind, I'll tell you a little story, is that when I oftentimes talk with folks, they're talking to me about the stressful things that are happening, for example, in the family, and they might say something like, for example, if there's a co-parenting situation, there are two parents in the home parenting a child, and they're having conflict in their relationship. What they often will say is, it doesn't impact my child because we're fighting in a different room, or we're fighting after the child goes to sleep, and that sort of thing. And the message is, there's been actually research, and physiologically based research, that there's one study that actually shows even if you have a 4-month-old baby who is asleep in another room, and parents are fighting in a different room, there's a lot of conflict and a lot of animosity. What happens is the baby's physiology during sleep shows that the baby is soaking that in. So one of the important messages is parenting and supporting parents is critically important, because parents' relationship with their baby, and also parents' relationship with each other who are raising the baby, impacts the baby. So the message around, if we really want to have babies thrive, we need to have grown-ups who are thriving. And so that focus, I know for Families First, that is not a difficult message. That's really what you have been holding up and lifting up for decades. That is critically important. And what we can see is we need to be able to help families, help grown-ups be able to express and experience all of their true and authentic emotions, and then regulate in a way that their babies also can regulate with them. I don't know if I'm going to think a little bit more about that also in terms of the messaging, but was that part of what you were thinking about? Did you have more of a question?
Mute here. Yeah, no, I was just kind of curious how you felt about, I think you answered it very well. And I guess really maybe it's more a question for some of the folks at Families First, because you are the ones delivering that kind of a message and helping people think through. And, it strikes me as one of those things that's a little bit easier said than done in a way.
Oh, so thank you. That's what I wanted to say. It's easier said than done. When we have staff, I'm going to speak for the staff at Families First, even though I haven't spoken to them about this, but I've spoken to a lot of folks. We have big hearts. Those of us who want to work with families, we have big hearts. We want to hear their stories and open and have families be the biggest advocates for their children as possible. And it's hard. And so supporting the adults, whether we're providers, program directors, and parents, supporting adults is what helps babies thrive. And it's harder than it looks.
Just interject with some of the things that are being said in the chat now. From Erica, one of our parent leaders and parent fellows, I learned a lot on things that she needed to work on to be able to help myself and my children on stress, mental health, social, emotional, and brain development. So thank you. And so there was a lot of echoing of that sentiment. There was a question from one of our board members at Ebola. Are there resources to help us to make our relationships with our children healthier and more positive? So any resources that you might want to share, or we can follow up with that with the slides.
Yeah, so if there are well, I would say Families First is a resource. I think that first. So for those sorts of programs, there's family home visiting programs and that sort of thing. But if you are interested in reading about this, one of the places that I recommend people go to is the 0 to 3 website. And it's spelled out 0 to 3, ZEROTOTHRE.org, 0 to 3. And there is a beautiful compendium of resources for providers and also for parents. And they have really wonderful resources for parents.
Thank you so much. Final question. This was one that was sent to me. What would you say to parents who are already seeing the signs of stress in their children?
The first thing that I would say is good for you for noticing. That is the biggest part of the battle. When you are paying attention, being present for your children, and you can notice the signs of stress, good for you. That's hard for parents to notice. It's hard for us to hold when we see our kids feeling stressed. So that's the first part. So feeling confident that you can pay attention, that you're paying attention to your child and you're noticing is, again, is a really important thing to take in. And I'm repeating it because I don't think parents believe that. I think they think there's something else, but that's a very, very important first step. Then what we want to do in terms of helping our kids is just like with adults, we don't want to dismiss it. We don't want to tell them, oh, it's going to be, it's going to be fine. Stop crying. It's going to be okay. That sort of thing. What we want to do, if we can, is wonder with them what they're feeling, wonder with them what they're worried about. Sometimes kids, depending on the age of the child, they can use their words to have discussions with you. My kids happen to have lots of discussions, and we used words a lot. Many kids, especially when they're stressed, it's going to come out through their play. So what you can do if you're noticing your children are stressed, a child is stressed at whatever age, is play. Be present and either read a book together, build something together, whatever your child likes to do. And through that conversation may open. Or through the play, you might be noticing the themes. For example, if the block tower keeps falling, and it is so frustrating, and you're noticing that it's more frustrating for your 3-year-old when the block tower falls than it ever was before, that they used to be okay with that. What we want to be present and help, sort of help the child have the words and the affirmation that that's okay. It is so frustrating when this tower falls. It almost makes me not want to do it anymore. What do you think? Should we keep trying? Those are the kinds of things when you can notice and be with your child through play. The child may then respond, that they're done with blocks, and I would follow your child's lead and also follow what your child needs. One of the things I just want to say that sometimes parents are worried, and they start worrying that this stress or these behaviors or these reactions that they're noticing are really worrisome to them, to the parent, or it's really beyond what they've ever seen their child do or feel before, or it's something that seems to be interfering with the child's ability to do their usual routines or that sort of thing. In those kinds of cases, I would say one of the first things, you might have a family's first support person, but calling a pediatrician and talking it over and saying, I'm really worried about this. What do you think? Would be my recommendation for a first step. And because sometimes young children, even babies, will show us stress that is beyond what we might expect is typical for that child or typical for the situation. And in those cases, we do want to, maybe get some more professional eyes on the child. My rule of thumb is, to the extent that the parent is worried, I'm worried. That parent, the parent is the expert. We are the experts of our children. We know if we feel like something's not right, and we've tried all of our good ways of being present with our kids, we may want to, have a consult. And again, I think our pediatricians are a very good first stop.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much to Dr. Dickstein. We really appreciate your time here. I'm going to turn it over now to Maureen O'Brien, who's our Director of Programming and Training, and two of our fellows. So, Maureen.
Thanks, Seth. And I agree, Susan. I think that you've made such important points about self-care not being selfish, and the kinds of things that we promote through our Families First programming. Our parents shouldn't feel guilty about these emotions. They should let them out. They should share them with one another. And we really have built that very, very deliberately into the curriculum that we've been doing during the pandemic, especially. So we are really thrilled to have many, I'm looking at the faces, many of our Power of Parenting graduates and our parent leaders and a couple of parent fellows. If you're curious about what that means, speak to anyone here at Families First, but there's different levels of involvement that parents have had with us this year that are very exciting. And two of them in particular, Erica Rodriguez and Juana Valdez, are here today. And one of the things that we asked them to do, and they already put great comments in the chat about how they feel about parents and parenting and dealing with stress, is we asked if they'd be willing to share just a minute or so about how they personally are dealing with the extra stress going on right now, what's working for them, and sort of how do they see that in the behavior of their child? Because as you said, all behavior has meaning, and when kids act out a certain way, you can tell where they are. So if it's okay, Erica, I would ask you to unmute and just give us a little bit of insight into how you're coping with stress and being resilient, because we know you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Rodriguez, and I am a mother of 4 children, 5, 4, 3, and 8 months. And I'm also in college, getting my bachelor's degree in business management, and I'm also involved in my community. But I was noticing that I was being very stressed through all the things that I was doing, and I was doing a lot. So I decided that I had to take a step back and cut down some things, take a break from school, and actually focus on dealing with my stress. And it was hard because I was a person that was very active and doing a lot of things, and I enjoyed that, but it was also making me too stressed, and it was also affecting my children. So my emotions were out of control, and then I was noticing that in my children. So then once I took a step back, my children benefited from that because I noticed that they were more happier. They weren't as angry sometimes. And it actually also made me feel better. So yes.
We're all clapping for you, Erica. That's awesome. I think you said a couple of things that are incredibly valuable for all of us to think about. One is that you really reflected on yourself, and instead of just powering through like so many of us try to do, you recognize that, you know, maybe there were things that could be put lower on our list, and, you know, instead of trying to do everything and feeling overly stressed. And also how important it is that you saw the result of that in your relationship with your child, because as Dr. Dickstein said, you know, they just pick up on our emotions even if we think we're hiding it from them. So kudos to you. Congratulations. That's a great tip for the rest of us, including me.
Maureen, may I just ask, I'm just curious if Erica can, if you can say, Erica, how you learned about Families First.
So I think it was through a flyer. Because I'm a person that looks for a lot of things to do in development for myself and my children. And I seen the program, and I'm always willing to learn something new. So I think that's how I learned about it. And I joined, and then I heard about the parenting leader position, and I also did that. And then I got into the ambassador program now.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Good luck. Great messages.
Thank you for asking that, Sharon. You know, we have almost a dozen, I think, parent fellows currently going through a program. So, you know, she's a wonderful representation of the folks that go through Power of Parenting and then identify themselves as people that really want to do more in the community. And many of them were already. We're just there to support them and help build their skills so that they can continue to do so. So thanks for that, Erica. And Juana, I'm looking in. Oh, there you are on my screen. You're on the far right. Welcome, and thank you for offering to say a few words yourself too. And just unmute first.
Hi everyone. Well, I'm not a person to think about some problem, so as not to be stressed. But when I feel a little stressed, I go to church to find a solution of my problems. And I feel free to leave all my burdens to God, which is the only one who has the solution of my life. When I'm home with my baby, with my son, I spend the time we're cooking, cleaning the house, do some arts and craft. And in the night, we take time together until he going to sleep. You know, I'm a busy person. I don't have time to think and stress myself.
I love it. Thank you, Juana. So what you're saying, I think I've heard from a few other parents too, is that their spirituality or their faith is also a very grounding factor in their life, and, you know, can get them back to a place of feeling more at peace, or at least, you know, that some higher power or there's some force bigger than them that, you know, that is sort of has a place in their thinking, and that helps them to get grounded. And the other thing you said that I think is really valuable, and we talk about it in our parent cafes in our program, we have parents share about the things they do to de-stress. And one of the things they do is talk about those moments of sharing together. Maybe it's reading, like Susan said, a book at nighttime, because routines are really helpful for kids, but they're also really helpful for us, right? They're like a milestone for us, like, okay, we got through another day. And here we are, we started the day together, we're ending the day together. And that alone, that serve and return that parents and children have with one another is a really reassuring force. And then I think the last thing I'd say about what both of you said is another thing we talk about when Susan talked about that balance between stress and resilience, is that one's coping is really what's going to get you through. And we can't cope all by ourselves. We have to cope with the wider community. We have to rely on our support systems, be it family or friends. And even in this really tricky remote environment, we just need to recognize that sometimes we need to reach out for help, and that others can help to sort of get us through those tough days. So, I know we're coming right up to 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to say, is it okay, Seth, if I say it? Okay. Thank you on behalf of Families First for attending this. I think Dr. Dickstein gave us wonderful ideas to noodle on, and maybe like you, I'm going to take 1 or 2 of those tips and try to put it into practice this week and see if I feel a little less stressed. And I want to thank those of you that know us and stuck around and listened. I want to thank those of you that are new to us and welcome you to look at our website, which is families-first.org, to learn more. There are some resources out there for those of you that were asking about resources. And I particularly want to thank Erica and Juana for stepping up and really thinking deeply about this question and being willing to share it in this forum. So thank you very much on behalf of Sue and the teams. We appreciate your attending, and we hope to see you all again sometime soon. Bye-bye.